Another similar story which Ojaswipi heard during her posting years in Sirarakong was about KAZIP and Singyo and the encounter with the goddess Philava one fateful night. In the month of October 1986, two young men, KAZIP and Singyo, both in their mid-20s, went for a joyride from Ukhrul to Sihai Phangre on KAZIP's bike. While heading back, it started to get dark. During the 80s, no other bikes except a few like Yamaha RX-100s could be seen in Ukhrul town. After riding on a bumpy ride for about 30 minutes, the Yamaha bike suddenly stopped working. They got down to check it. While KAZIP was busy checking the bike, Singyo went to relieve himself. When he came back, he behaved as if someone was with him. He was smiling and talking, but KAZIP could not see anyone except him. KAZIP asked his friend why he was smiling and talking when nobody else was present, but Singyo did not reply. Instead, he asked whether the bike was fixed. KAZIP said there was nothing wrong with the bike, so they resumed their journey. Singyo continued to talk, but KAZIP was clueless about who he was talking to. He turned back to check, but did not see anyone. He asked, "Tausing, whom are you talking to?" Singyo requested his friend to concentrate on his driving and not to bother them. KAZIP thought he was rehearsing for the drama which they were to perform in the evening gatherings during Christmas. When they reached Lunghar, most of the villagers were already asleep, so without stopping, they continued on. At Shirui Junction, Singyo asked KAZIP to stop the bike. KAZIP stopped, thinking his friend wanted to go to the loo again. Instead, he waved his hand and said, "Good night, see you soon." "What is wrong with you? Was somebody here at the junction?" All this while, Singyo never bothered to answer his friend, but this time he said, "Tauzip, I have found the most beautiful girl in this world. She came with us on our bike from our last stop. Did you see her? Was not she beautiful? She said she'll come to see me tomorrow at Hamleikong." He was very excited, but the next moment he collapsed, complaining of terrible pain in his chest. There was no mobile phones those days and nobody was around, as it was almost 11 in the night. KAZIP did not know what to do. He lifted his friend on the bike and asked him to hold onto him. Singyo was writhing in pain and could not hardly sit. KAZIP was a good biker, and with all his skills, he rode as fast as he could. KAZIP's house was in Dungre Junction, Ukhrul. When they reached the deputy commissioner's office, Singyo requested KAZIP to find him a place to rest. He said he could not go on any longer. He turned back to see his friend, but he also saw a woman in a white dress behind Singyo. Her hair covered her face and her chin seemed to be resting on Singyo's left shoulder. Instead of stopping the bike, he accelerated. After about 40 seconds, he could see a light coming from a house just above the road. It was already midnight. He called out for help. A man in his late 50s came down with a torch. The man, Ngachonmi, helped him carry Singyo to the drawing room. They laid him there and his wife quickly made a fire in the kitchen and they massaged him with mustard oil. They tried their best to revive him for more than 3 hours. Singyo breathed his last at 4 in the morning. Family and relatives were informed. Soon, his body was taken back to Dungre Junction for burial. Though there was no suspicion, everyone wanted to know exactly how he died, so a doctor was called to examine him. Dr. Makanmi, a relative of Singyo, came to examine him and said that it was a case of heart attack. Hence, the matter was closed. It was customary for the family members to bathe and dress the dead person before the burial. KAZIP was with him all this while. When they removed his shirt, he noticed a dark palm-shaped bruise in Singyo's chest. He quickly bent down to cover it with the towel he was holding, for he did not want the family members to know that he was taken away by the goddess. After a few weeks, KAZIP came to pay his gratitude for the help Ngachonmi had given them that night. The two discussed the incident over a cup of tea. Ngachonmi said that all these days he was wondering about who else could have been with the two of them on that fateful night. He said he saw a woman protecting Singyo from falling off the bike. He said, "Who was that woman who helped you bring Singyo that night in such a condition?" Immediately, KAZIP recalled the white-dressed woman he saw behind Singyo. "Why do you say that?" asked KAZIP. "I was in so much of a hurry to bring him up here that I did not notice much. But I saw a woman holding him when I got down to help you. As soon as I reached for him, she let go of him and he just fell into my arms. I heard Singyo saying thank you, but he was not actually looking at me, so I thought a woman accompanied the two of you." KAZIP narrated their entire journey to Ngachonmi. He also told him about the handprint on Singyo's chest. Ngachonmi said, "So she came with you till here. You should be thankful to God for not making you as handsome as your friend Singyo. He should not have given her the chance to follow him. The goddess will follow only those who will not resist her advances. One should be very careful about her advances." After a year, KAZIP narrated the same story to Singyo's parents. His father was a pastor. They requested him not to tell anybody else. As Christians, they did not want to let others know that the son was taken away by the goddess KASHONG PHILAVA. But at that time, the story had already leaked out. People talk about it while seated around their hut, which is called Maishum, and while on their way to the field, and so on. Ojaswipi heard about the story of Shangmi, Singyo, and Shirui Philava in one such narration long after our Tare's story of the encounter with the goddess. Even after hearing all these stories about the goddess, she still could not believe them. She would just brush them off as a fairy tale. Much later in her life, one day, while she was reading the story of the temptation of Jesus, she came to realize that the devil must have come to Jesus in human form to tempt him. She concluded that if the devil can tempt the Son of God in human form, he can easily lure away those who don't have the strong foundation of faith in God. Ojaswipi from Pali village was suffering from severe stomach ulcer. She taught Hindi in the government school. In January 1994, her stomach ulcer worsened. She was hospitalized for a week in Imphal and was declared critical. So the family brought her back to the village with no hope left. Her mother nursed her night and day, taking care of her needs. But Ojaswipi could not eat more than a morsel. Her health declined and soon she became a living corpse. Her mother would take her outside in the morning sunlight and nurture her. This continued for many months, but in vain, as there was no sign of improvement. One morning at around 8:30, Ojaswipi stopped breathing, so her family members thought she was dead. The news of her death spread to the villages where she had taught before. People came to pay their last respects. The family decided to conduct a burial the next day, as many of the relatives who lived in Nagaland would arrive late. Meanwhile, Ojaswipi's spirit was passing the land of the dead. She saw a number of perplexing sights. Her relatives, friends, and people who had died were all alive, and they were living in small huts on the left side of a river. She was walking on the right side of the river, and a voice told her that all those who have found God's salvation would live on the right side of the river. As she continued her journey in the land of the dead, she saw a beautiful church at a distance, its bells tolling. As she approached the entrance of the church, she saw Jesus, and she was enraptured on beholding the face of God in all his glory. She fell on her knees and said, "Jesus, thank you so much for saving my soul. You have given me the joy of salvation, but I have 3 children who have not tasted the joy of salvation. I have not done anything of worth to be able to see your face. Must I come empty-handed in your presence? If you give me one more chance, I will serve you with all my heart. I will go wherever you sent me for your purpose. I will not live for myself anymore, but for you, only if you would allow me to go back to serve you." Jesus did not say anything to her, but she could hear the church bells toll. The next moment, she found herself returning to where she had started her journey. As she turned around, she saw an image of herself coming towards her dressed in white. She did not remember owning white clothes in real life, but she saw that her other self was wearing a white mekhala and white shirt. The image greeted her and said, "Pakahau is also in the church." Ojaswipi realized that Pakahau was her relative who had died at a very young age. The way back was a labyrinth of multiple roads that left Ojaswipi puzzled. Her image guided Ojaswipi out. Then Ojaswipi woke up from a death-like slumber. She was stupefied to find herself surrounded by a sea of relatives and friends. She could see that they were wailing and mourning. It was 3 in the morning when she came back to life. She was to be buried that day around 11. She had remained dead for about 19 hours. She then narrated her journey to the netherworld, and they all praised God together for bringing her back to life. Villagers and people from the neighboring villages had come to pay their last respect to her. Even today, they still talk about the miracle they witnessed that day. Ojaswipi began to pray more and started devoting her time earnestly to God after her near-death experience. She remembered how Jesus revealed himself to her to renew her faith in him. In her fragile physical condition, she remembered what she promised Jesus when she met him. She was still too weak to manage by herself without support. Her mother was always by her side to give her a helping hand. One day, her mother took her out for a stroll in the neighborhood. As they passed through Ai Paishola's house, who was a well-known medicine woman of the village, they saw a mother holding her 3-year-old dying daughter, pleading Ai Paishola for help. They approached the despairing mother and inquired what was going on. Ojaswipi saw that the little girl was gasping for breath. She bent down and touched her, saying, "Oh, what happened?" Immediately the girl regained her consciousness. None of them, including Ojaswipi, could believe the miracle. It was much later that she realized that Jesus had given her the gift of healing. The story of the healing of the little girl started spreading, and the sick began pouring in for Ojaswipi's healing touch. Now there was also another Khanong in the village by the name Ao Sareng, who had no knowledge of medical sciences, but he was adept in delivering babies. He could handle any medical complications with regards to the delivery of a newborn. He was even considered better than the midwives and doctors, for which many preferred Ao Sareng's assistance. Shiyan, a GP college student, eloped with her classmate Bijoy, who belonged to Meitei community before completing her graduation. Both families had opposed their union. Shiyan hailed from Pali and Bijoy from Lamlong, Imphal. Bijoy's parents would not allow the son to bring girl from the hill, and that too a Christian. An Orthodox Meitei Hindu would think that a Christian member in their household would defile their house. In the same way, the hill people felt that to give away their daughter to a Hindu family in marriage was like sending the daughter to a slaughterhouse. So there was no way of reconciling these two opposing families. Bijoy's family tried everything to separate them, but in vain. By this time, Shiyan was 8 months pregnant. Unable to separate them, Bijoy's parents resorted to the other means. They paid a huge sum of money to a black magician to kill Shiyan in secret. No one knew exactly what the black magician did to her, but the pain in her stomach intensified. She could neither sit nor lie down. Doctors suggested an abortion since there was less chance of survival of both the baby and the mother. Out of desperation, one day, Shiyan's sister Zingyin recommended them to Awo Sareng. Awo Sareng was brought in from Pali in a private taxi to examine Shiyan. He told them that he has not come across anything like this before. He told them there was no way the baby would survive. He instead recommended they meet Oja Swipi, the healer. Oja Swipi offered to help, although she had not tried her hands in delivering a baby. She did not know what prompted her to help this despairing soul, but she did remember her promise to God that she would go wherever He asked her to. So by faith, she resolved to help them. She told them that there was nothing too difficult nor too big a problem for God to solve. She told Bijoy to believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and become a Christian. Only then the child and the mother would be safe. Bijoy would do anything to save his wife and his unborn child. Oja Swipi prayed for them and laid her right hand on Shiyan. Right after the prayer, the baby was delivered safely in her hands. Ever since, Bijoy had no doubt in the Christian God. Gradually, after seeing the beautiful baby boy, even Bijoy's parents began to accept Shiyan and the baby. The miraculous healings performed by Oja Swipi became well known in the region. The local pastor of Pali, Oja Ayui, came to know what God had been doing through Oja Swipi. As a pastor, he himself had done what he could through prayers, but all the ministers of God are not blessed with the same gift. For all these days, Pastor Ayui had been praying for the same Ayo who was unwell, but there was no sign of improvement. Ayo's condition became critical. As a last resort, Pastor Ayui turned to Oja Swipi for help. Pali is a large village with 4 localities occupied more than 400 houses. Pastor Ayui traveled from Kasomtang to Kongitang, crossing a small rivulet that flows between the two neighborhoods. Oja Swipi had already left for school, so Pastor Ayui went to her class and requested her to come and attend to Ayo, who was dying. Oja Swipi answered nonchalantly, "I cannot leave my students. Let me first finish my class." Pastor Ayui begged her to understand the urgency, but she calmly said, "Ayo will be all right." "Have you also visited him this morning?" inquired the pastor. "No, I have not seen him yet," said she. "Then how do you know he'll be all right?" asked the pastor impatiently. The pastor wanted to request the headmaster of the school to grant her half-day leave, but she was not willing. She told Pastor Ayui that God had revealed everything to her about Ayo while Pastor Ayui was on his way to her. She said, "God is not in a hurry to perform miracles. All He wants from us is to have faith and to trust in Him." She assured him that she would come as soon as her class got over and told him to go ahead. Pastor Ayui had to comply with what she said because it corresponded with what the Bible said. He waited for her anyway. Half an hour later, Pastor Ayui was relieved to see Oja Swipi coming out from her class.